the last archetype rematch of the year and the last video of the year. Alright, time to take a look at the second half of the new stuff that came around while my channel was temporarily suspended. And we have the lineup here is a bit better, I want to say. Well, should I say a bit more interesting than the lineup we took a look at in the previous episode. And we're starting off with, I presume, what the community could be considering one of their favorite XC spammers, those being heroic challengers and champions. I think making their debut on this game, on this series, because I do not remember talking about them in this series particular. But anyway, here's Heroic Challenger Knuckle Knife, our first monster we're taking a look at, and it's really good. It's field presence for days, along with some neat level setup for your rank 4 plays. Yep, rank 4 plays because, yes, the archetype only consists of rank 4 monsters, as we all know, but they actually received a rank 1 monster, which is not very good. But in all honesty, it's a decent addition because this thing is a level 1 monster, which is actually pretty good. So I guess you can't, it can't hurt for if you run it for at least one copy of it. So, but we'll get to it later. Now we gotta take a look at their other main deck monster, which is Heroic Challenger Morningstar, which is another great monster which has the potential to special summon itself because it actually works well with stuff like Photon Thrasher, the Heroic Challenger Thousand Blades, which is their own monster, and not to mention it also works with Knuckle Knife well as well. So yeah, I'd said well a pretty big number of times there in that last segment. But anyway, next up we have the monster that I mentioned, Heroic Champion Jarn Griper, I guess. I don't know how you pronounce this. This is the rank 1 monster I mentioned, and it's pretty underwhelming. Well, it has the potential to revive your fallen rank 4 monsters in order to continue your battle-oriented onslaught, and has a life point restoration effect, which is pretty out of place for this deck. But when you take a look at their next monster, Heroic Champion Cleom Soleil, the life point boost effect becomes pretty obvious why it's there in the first place. Well, yeah, Cleom Soleil is actually a very interesting OTK machine when it comes to OTK machines, as its attack gaining effects are actually permanent, and it can enable you to run Life Equalizer as an excellent and an interesting tech choice. So yeah, it can combo well with some of their other beat sticks, such as Excalibur, for example, to mention a classic there. So yeah, it's a fairly good card, and we're closing off with Heroic Envoy, which is their only spell card that they received, and it's a search card which can fetch stuff from both the deck and the graveyard. It's as simple as that, and that's why you run 3. The next archetype that received support is the Kuriboh archetype in 1 card worth of support, that being the Skilled Chestnut Magician, which is the best of the Skilled Magician series by far because it only requires 1 spell counter to work, and not to mention the stuff he can search is pretty damn impressive given the fact that it can actually turn Kuriboh token spawning decks into a legitimate link climbing machines if pulled off right. So yeah, definitely max out on this guy as soon as he hits the TCG. The next archetype that received 2 cards worth of support being very loosely, are Egyptian gods in form of the Magical Trick Mirror and the Soul Energy Max trap cards. Magical Trick Mirror, for some of you might be looking at it a bit with a puzzled look, because Magical Trick Mirror was a generic anime-only trap card in the show, and it's only part of the archetype because it mentions Obelisk the Tormentor in its effect text for some reason, which makes me legitimately scared if the other Egyptian gods are in for that weird specific support that the Winged Dragon of Ra has been getting over the years. And Soul Energy Max is a slightly better variation of Obelisk's effects, which can be used during either player's turn. But it's a trap card, and yeah, both of these are trap cards, so to put it simply, you just don't run these. That was it for the Egyptian gods, and then we have another archetype which only received 1 card worth of support, those being Simorgs. And the card that you received is Simorg, the Bird of Extermination, which actually has a very interesting Seraphinite effect, as it allows you to provide you with additional normal summons. And it's not even limited to itself, although if you decide to summon this thing with its additional normal summon effect, you get a bonus effect, which is always nice. And not to mention, it also enables you to do some funny stuff with Dark Stimorg, so yeah, this is a really good card to consider having. Run 2 or 3 of these. And then we have the new MARINCESS support, and we start off with MARINCESS Spring Girl, which has a very cool special summoning condition, which by itself makes it a 3-off, but I am quite flabbergasted by the secondary of effects. The milling effect is probably something engineered by someone who thought these things needed even more synergy with Merlantians. And the burn damage is, I guess, here to tie them spiritually to Trickstars because of anime, and you know, yeah, regardless, this is a great monster and you should always max out on it. Marincess Sleepy Maiden might actually seem weird to you at first because of that weird equipping effect, seeing how the only monster that interacts with this is their new Link monster. But overall, it's a special summonable monster, a special summonable level 5 monster, so yeah, it is a staple simply because it's a free monster which you can special summon that provides some additional benefits to the card it targets in order to special summon itself. And our first Link monster of this new Marincess support wave is Coral Triangle. It has standard Deco Talker, arrows up, bottom left and bottom right, and has a very okay lineup of effects, as it allows you to search trap cards. Why trap cards? Yeah, I know they don't have a lot of spell cards to choose from, seeing how they didn't have many in the anime, but they did actually receive the new spell card, which is actually really good. And yeah, its other effects are perfectly fine, and it's a decent one-off in your Marincess Extra Deck toolbox. And then we have Marincess Aqua Argonaut, which is the Link monster I mentioned, which can interact with Sleepy Maiden's equipping effect. And it's fine, nothing too amazing. It actually can provide some unconventional way of extra linking if you use it right. And not to mention, this thing's when this thing is present in the extra monster zone, it actually makes some. It actually has the potential to be a very legitimate threat if you pair it up with the right materials and set up beforehand in order to go into her and prepare your board setup carefully. It's another decent one-off. Then we have Marincess Dive, which is archetypal consistency boosting at its finest, so you definitely always run 3 of these. Marincess Bubble Ring is a battle trap, which can be a bit too slow in nowadays environment, but the fact that it actually gives you a free Link 2 monster is actually kind of neat. And its graveyard effect can actually be very beneficial, so you can actually run it as a target for Foolish Burial Goods, if anything. Then we have Marincess Circulation, which actually has the potential to give you faster cycles through your Link monster lineup. And the fact that you can activate this from your hand by fulfilling a condition is actually really nice. So you definitely run at least one of these, at least as a side option. And that was it for the Marincess lineup, and it was actually pretty good. The Spring Girls effect is actually quite interesting, how they precisely made it for the interaction between Merlantians and other water support, and some other water support offset archetype actually got some new support, and we'll get to it soon. But right now we have to talk about the DDD archetype, which also got some new support, and it's actually the subject of my most watched archetype analysis to this day. I have no idea why DDDs of all things, what they did to receive so many views. And then we have our first monster of this our support wave, which is DD Griffon, which is one step away from being so flawlessly designed, but the way the third effect is engineered makes me reconsider everything, because, well, the first effect is actually a nice special summoning condition, which is always appreciated in DDDs, and not to mention, if it's pendulum summoned, provides some nice even 0 plussing in terms of replacing stuff you don't need with something you might need. Yeah, and the third effect is something I would consider really good if it wasn't for the fact that it needed to be special summoned from the graveyard, which is the place DDDs, well, non-pendulum pendulum DDDs where they are not present in any shape or form unless you discard another Griffon with this thing's effect. So yeah, I would say run 1 to 2 of these, if anything, because it can be a slight brick every once in a while. And then our final monster for the DDD lineup is the DDD Amnesty King Doom Machina, which is the newest of the boss monsters in this lineup. And it's pretty bombastic in its own right, as it's actually a very interesting and unique take on the Cyber Dragon Infinity type of effect, the way it detaches attaches materials onto itself, and not to mention it can actually be summoned on top of any other Xyz monster that has DDD in its name, so you can actually so this gives you actually a reason to run some of the lower level or lower ranked Xyz monsters, such as Wave King Caesar, the base Wave King Caesar, so you can actually use its effect to gain that plussing effect or recycling effect during the end phase, and then summon this thing on top of it and go in for the overkill. You can also use any other Xyz monsters that you would expect, like Doom King Kali Yuga, the Super Doom King Dark Armageddon, or I don't know, the Big Caesar. You have quite a few options to pick from. And then next up we have their only spell card, which is the Patented Dark Contract of Documents, which is their field spell, a long overdue field spell, which is kind of underwhelming considering that the Dark Contract of the Abyss is actually still the better lockdown card for what this thing is trying to accomplish. But being searchable is highly recommended, so I do recommend putting this onto the field until you set up your not Dark Contract of the Abyss, but the Eternal Darkness. That's right, I mixed up those two. So yeah, I recommend putting this onto the field until you can set up your field for your Eternal Darkness plays. So yeah, DDD Headhunt is a very fun little quick effect version of a mind control, which can be fun on a casual level, but competitively it's a bit too slow on the uptake to be of any usage. So I would say run by preference, if anything. And that was it for DDDs, and now we have a whole bunch of new PERFORMAPAL support cards. And I'm actually not gonna spend too much time here because all of these are rather underwhelming, really. First of which we have PERFORMAPAL Odd Eyes Valet, which is fine, but in the game's current environment, it's not too amazing, and really PERFORMAPALs can't waste deck space for effects such as this. I can see that they're really trying to shy away a bit from the horrific restrictions of the pendulum monsters by forcing people to play maybe some other non-pendulum monsters in their PERFORMAPAL decks, but I think this archetype would actually need a thorough reimagining because of how the new Master Rules, well, they were screwed over from Master Rule 4 basically, but the Master Rule 5 basically kept those restrictions in place while speeding up all the other decks. So yeah, they've kind of gotten screwed over there and then some. So yeah, but Classic KAIRYU, PERFORMAPAL Classic KAIRYU is actually interesting, as it actually has the potential to be very useful outside of PERFORMAPAL and Pendulum decks altogether. And for example, the Final Countdown decks can actually really benefit from this thing's Pendulum effect. Well, Pendulum and Monster effects combined, because the Pendulum effect by itself does not make any sense, but when you read the Monster effects, it becomes really clear what this thing is supposed to do. Not to mention, this thing is actually searchable by 1-for-1. Well, not 1-for-1 if you want to place it onto the field, but it can actually be searched by Rare, though, if you control a level 1 monster, which I think Final Countdown decks, yeah, they can on occasion control level 1 monsters if they, for example, use Battle Fader, which is a very common staple card in Final Countdown decks. Then we have PERFORMAPAL Lady Ange, which is actually a simple and very proficient consistency generator card for PERFORMAPALs, and it actually combos well with PERFORMAPAL GENTRUDER, which these two were actually designed to interact with each other, as seen by their pendulum scales and the fact that one mentions the other in their effect text. So yeah, this is actually a very nice pendulum scale if you're building your deck around pure PERFORMAPALs and not focusing on either magicians or odd eyes monsters. Then we have PERFORMAPAL Odd Eyes Butler, which is made to support the valet playstyle, which I was not too big on in the first place. And lastly, when it comes to pure PERFORMAPAL cards, we have Barrow KAIRYU, which is also made to support all the other KAIRYU monsters, in addition to some PERFORMAPAL monsters. But yeah, classic KAIRYU is, in my opinion, the superior KAIRYU of the PERFORMAPAL lineup here. But the fact that it's also a level 8 monster with 3000 defense is actually a somewhat of a plus, as it allows the usage of trading in PERFORMAPAL. So yeah. And for the final card of this lineup, we have Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon. This is a pendulum ritual monster, the last piece of puzzle of combinations that was missing. Yeah, this is the very first pendulum ritual monster, and yeah, you can summon it with the exact same ritual spell as you summon the Odd Eyes Gravity Dragon with, and it has very unique effects, to say the least. And well, its effects are pretty standard for a monster of this combination, if you can say that actually. But yeah, it's actually searchable by Double Iris Magician due to having Pendulum Graph in its name. So yeah, it's also a good thing that a Double Iris Magician recently came off the ban list, although the January 17th ban list is fast approaching. So let's see what actually will transpire in that ban list to follow. I know that the OCG already banned Fusion Destiny, like I mentioned in the previous Archetype rematch, but yeah, we'll just have to see how this thing goes. As for this thing, well, you can actually make a fun little ritual deck involving this thing, seeing how Gravity Dragon is actually quite decent as a ritual monster by itself. So yeah, feel free to experiment with it and document where the experiments lead. And that was it for the PERFORMAPAL lineup. The next archetype which received support are, well, the Merlantians and, well, the water support in general, as these cards have nothing to do with Merlantians, but let's just call them the Umi Brigade, since all of these cards revolve around the field spell Umi. First of all, there were two monsters which actually pulled two normal monsters from back in the day, one of which is still to this day an OCG exclusive into the archetype. Those being Jellyfish, which is now a part of the archetype due to receiving a retrain called Physalia. And then we have the Fiend Kraken, which is still an OCG exclusive to this day, which also is part of the archetype due to receiving its retrain, that being Doom Kraken. Both of these are very run-of-the-mill standard generic water support, although I would argue that Doom Kraken is slightly better in this case, but both of these are usually not gonna see too much play due to the fact that archetypal support is usually a bit on an upper level when compared to these two. Then we have Yorishiro of the AQUA, which is a retrain of Maiden of the AQUA, and as far as retrains go, yep, it's an upgrade by technicality, but again, like the previous two, it's nothing too amazing, and yeah, it's perfectly fine on all fronts, but nothing too amazing. KAIRYU-SHIN Leviathan is the retrain of the original KAIRYU-SHIN normal monster, and it's the fact that it can interact with the KAIRYU-SHIN back row, which I covered slightly in the previous Archetype rematch volumes, is kind of nice, seeing how those cards are actually somewhat decent. So here's a monster which can actually take some advantage from them. And then we have Mega Fortress Whale, which has the potential to basically spawn you a whole field worth of direct attackers, which is cute, but it requires a bit too much setup to actually make it work. And the last monster is Abyss Keeper, which is the first generic fish water Link 2 monster that has come out ever since the Link monsters were introduced, which is like one of the biggest examples of a tad too late, but I guess some Link dedicated decks can make use out of its effect, so yeah. Then we have Fish Sonar, which is a search effect for this very weird specific lineup of monsters, so I guess you run a couple of these if you're building a deck around this gimmick for some reason. Sea Stealth 2 is a continuous spell Umi replacement with some additional effects, and it's searchable by some stuff in the Archetype and Massive Codes there, so I guess running one of these doesn't hurt. And then we have KAIRYU-SHIN of the Reef, which is, again, a nice field setup card, but the fact that it's a trap card can be a tad too slow, especially for a fake archetype such as this. So watch out with the ratios, if anything. And that was it for the Water Umi Brigade support. I skimmed over it massively because I don't want this video to be too long, and not to mention that I don't have pretty much anything interesting to say because this lineup of cards probably won't ever bring anything so game-changingly meta-defining to the table, so I won't spend too much time on it. Then we have another archetype which only got one card worth of support. Those are Starry Knights. Starry Knight ORBITAEL is the subject of talking here. And it has a it has a quick effect which allows you to target a more light monster you control and tribute it to set some of their back row pieces from your deck to your field. So it's a nice addition to the archetype in the form of how it can interact with their monsters in order to tribute them, in order to get your back row pieces onto the field. I would have loved it if you could actually activate their trap cards, but I guess setting them to the field is okay in a way, although it leaves it vulnerable to MST. But as far as Starry Knight monsters go, it's also a decent 2100 at defense wall, which I guess can be useful in a Brickfest situation environment. So yeah, it's not the worst, but it's not the best, but it's far from the worst of the archetype support that Starry Knights got. And next archetype that received some new support are Nordics. The first monster being Golimbursty of the Nordic Beast, which is a new Nordic Beast tuner, which actually replaces Gold Foxtail of the Nordic Beast as your primary tuner, since seeing how the Nordic Beasts have the most synergy between each other, and Thor can be summoned with relative ease. And not to mention it has the same kind of effect that Vanadis has, which lets you use this thing to summon other ice tier monsters such as Odin or Loki in this case. So yeah, a fairly standard lineup of effects for a Nordic tuner in this day and age. Then we have the last main deck monster and the last monster period that they received, which is Ivaldi of the Nordic Smiths, which has a special summoning condition, which is always nice. And it allows you to search Nordic relics when he's summoned, which is something I would call not too impressive, seeing how the Nordic relics aren't quite good. But the addition of 2 new back row pieces makes this effect a lot more usable all of a sudden. And we shall take a look at those cards soon. First of which we have Nordic Relic Hlidskjalf, alright. And it's a normal spell which special summons from the deck and searches for stuff when banished from the graveyard. Needless to say, you run 3 of these at all times because, well, we finally have a replacement for Gleipnir. Maybe, I guess you can still run Gleipnir because unrestricted searching from the deck is always appreciated. And then we have our final card of the Nordic archetype, which is Nordic Relic Svalin, which is a very powerful lockdown effect, along with a monster reborn for Ice Tier monsters, still limiting themselves to Ice Tier monsters, but they are more accessible than ever, so you might as well go all out with this one and run at least 2 of these, because it's highly searchable by Ivaldi. And that was it for the Nordics, and yeah, Nordics are getting better and better by the day, so yeah, seeing new support that helps them achieve that goal is really appreciated, and I would like to see some more stuff added to the Nordic pool. Maybe expand the mythology with a few new synchros. That would be really nice. Maybe give them a few quick effects here and there, and yeah, you suddenly have a very potent meta-relevant archetype. And speaking of meta-relevant archetypes, here are the new vampire support cards. First of which we have the Vampire Ghost Ogre. I actually did some play testing earlier on with the new vampire support because I was actually constructing a vampire deck for my ex-girlfriend, seeing how she's a big fan of the whole vampire aesthetic, and I really want to get her into Yu-Gi-Oh! And Vampire Ghost Ogre is actually pretty interesting in this regard, seeing how it's a quick effect that enables you to go into additional normal summons, which I think is really funny. Well, that is the secondary effect. Well, the first effect allows you to set up your graveyard along with fetching your high-level stuff to your hand. The most relevant options here being Frolin and the Vampire Scarlet Scourge. Setting up your graveyard with Retainer and Familiar is the way to go in this deck, and not to mention that being able to perform up to 3 normal summons per turn thanks to their continuous spell, and this thing is always a nice bonus. I wouldn't run 3 of these, but 2 of these are perfectly fine and absolutely necessary to play in your deck if you plan on doing anything relevant with it. That was their only main deck monster. Now we move on to their 2 extra deck monsters, first of which we have the Link 3 monster, Vampire Fascinator. It's an on-summon, resummon from the graveyard, and upon tributing a vampire monster, you can snag one of your opponent's monsters from their side of the field in order to use it to further your Link plays with some stuff like Vampire Sucker, or to go into the Yuki-Onna Link 4 monster to lock them out of the graveyard if you're playing a Zombie World variant. So yeah, it's definitely the most fascinating pun of this support card of this support wave. So yeah, also the summoning condition is actually really nice if you're playing some other tech cards which are not zombie cards, or if you're playing a turbo deck with nothing but zombies, seeing how you contribute, seeing how this thing contributes itself in order to get yourself a strong monster from the opponent's control into your control. So yeah. And our final monster and the final card period is the Undead Vampire, which is the rank 8 Xyz monster with 3000 attack and 2800 defense. Requires 2 or more level 8 monster, and you can summon him the same way you can as Sheridan, but only of course for level 8 monsters. However, this one is actually not too necessary in the deck. I mean, I personally ran him as a one-off when I was testing that deck I was mentioning a few moments earlier with Ghost Ogre with 2 Sheridans, and it's kind of like a zombie version of number 95, if I can compare it to anything. Although this one has a downside that it doesn't allow you to freely mill stuff to the graveyard, because if it did, I presume it would see the ban list pretty fast. And it simply mills 4 cards from the top of both players' decks and revives 1 monster among them, which is actually a pretty neat way to get some potential plussing, as you can actually dump some valuable stuff into the graveyard, such as Glow Up Bloom, Mizuki, and some other generic zombie support, which actually loves being in the graveyard. Not to mention, you can also have the potential to set up the opponent's graveyard, but you usually summon him when you're about ready to go in for the overkill, so that problem isn't as present as the other problem which vampires are susceptible to, the various vulnerabilities to various forms of disruptions via hand traps. So yeah, I know Voivode can actually negate hand traps, but his kind of negation is a bit too specific for the decks. So yeah, that was it for vampires, and yeah, we're slowly getting to the end of this archetype rematch. And our next archetype of interest is the DD archetype. I mean the D.D. archetype, and not D/D/D archetype. The archetype based on the earliest archetype bunch of cards which are focused on banishing. And yeah, we won't be here for too long. First of which we have Propitious Warrior Lady, which is only here because of lore reasons, and the only thing I'm gonna say about her is that it's actually a pretty funky hand trap effect for warriors, and not to mention it's a must include for all warlocks because of how vulnerable they can be to pretty much anything. Then we have DD Assault Carrier, which is a card I actually forgot to include in my initial review, and it's an okay beatstick which keeps up with the theme of the deck with its summoning condition. Then we have Dark Dimension Soldier, which is a synchro retrain of DD Warrior, and it's a bit too underwhelming, so you obviously don't run him in anything relevant. And then we have DDD Different Dimension Derby, which is another card I forgot to include in my initial review, and this one is quite frankly baffling, very, very baffling, and that's why you don't ever consider running it. And that was it for the DD archetype, and the only two archetypes remain, one of which only has one card worth of support. We shall take care of the bigger one first, which is the Barian Emperor / number 101 to number 107 support wave. Yeah, this is and also this also ties to the Shark support series, so we have three archetypes that we're taking a look at. Okay, so first off we have Abyss Shark, which is a long overdue replacement for Mermaid Shark, although you can run the aforementioned Mermaid Shark still as a one-off if you are a bit short on consistency boosting effects, but Abyss Shark tends to do the job himself in addition to some other stuff which you can use to fuel your field with water monsters in order to get your combos going. Crystal Shark helps out with getting out some of the trickier Xyz monsters out of your extra deck, and as their last main deck monster, it's actually made to combo pretty well with Abyss Shark as well. Then we have NAFIL ASYLUM HETH Knight, which is a pretty unusual name, but as you can see from the artwork, it's a retrain of number 101. It has the exact same snagging effect, although this one actually has the potential to be better than the original 101, seeing how you can attach a number from 101 to 107 to it, and then attach the opponent's monster to it, ensuring that you get to use the effect always, rather than the number 101 letting you only use the effect once due to the way how you are supposed to detach those materials. So yeah, better in a way that you can constantly keep using the effect if you need, but worse given the fact that it's a level 5 monster and it requires level 5 monsters, meaning it's not as splashable as the original 101. And then its Chaos version has the potential to spawn your field with lots of monsters with really decent effects or huge beatsticks, whatever you might desire at the moment. And not to mention you can summon it without a rank up magic, which is actually kind of odd given how this archetype focuses on rank up magics from time to time. So yeah. Barian's Chaos Draw does just about anything for this deck, although its only downside is that you need to top deck it first in order to for it to be usable, although this is circumvented by number 71 and some of the other support cards that this archetype has received, such as Ascension of the Seven Emperors, which has the potential to either search your new back row or top deck it, allowing for very potent comboing into your further plays. So yeah, great card overall, and you should definitely max out on this. This along with Barian's Chaos Draw. Rebirth of the Seven Emperors is fine, but its activation condition is a bit too gimmicky for my taste. Reincarnation of the Seven Emperors is a bit too battle oriented in order to be up to speed with the modern metagame of the year that is 21, that will soon become the year 2022 by the time this card gets released. And Eternity of the Seven Emperors is outclassed by Monster Reborn by almost every single way, and not to mention you can achieve better results using Skilled Rain, Dark Ruler No More, and Evenly Matched in this deck. And that was it for this archetype, this combination of archetypes. And the very last card is a singular support card for the whole numbers archetype collection. And that is the spell card Numbers Avail. And yeah, you basically get any number monster with 3 materials, which is really good. Yeah, you basically have a whole repertoire of monsters to pick from. So you basically play this in whatever deck you might need, and you summon whatever number monster you might need for the situation at hand. The problem, of course, being that you are forced to waste other extra deck slots with potentially monsters which you might don't need, simply for the sake of transferring them onto the materials, which makes it somewhat outclassable by Draglubion, the number 98 Draglubion. But anyway, yeah, that was it for this archetype rematch. I hope you all enjoyed the very last archetype rematch. I tried to keep it as concise as I possibly can, and all I can say is, let's bid this year farewell. It was certainly better than the last one, and let's hope that the next year will be better as proven. Well, let's hope the next year will be better with a touch more of actual good things happening and a touch less of actual pandemic happening. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, updates, comment, like, and subscribe. Be sure to check out my Patreon when you got the time. Maybe drop a few donations if you feel like it. And as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. So see you all and have a good day. Peace.